Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, June 13th, 2019. Russia, if you're listening, please do the show for me. I'm very tired. I don't know. You probably wouldn't do that good of a job of it, but who cares? I mean, I guess that's the winning formula. No matter what, you just ask the Russians to come in and do things for you, and it all works out from there. Daily Co's Radio is live now, I am told, all the way from Portland, Maine, by Bill himself, unless it is, again, the Russians or perhaps some other foreign government interfering and giving me this material. We're live, and if you listen closely, you may hear the president of Finland drop a bunch of Oppo research. It's called Oppo research on Kagro X's lap. That's good, because that would be my lap. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. And, what should I do? I have the FBI on speed dial. I'm the exact opposite of Donald Trump. Of course, everybody's talking about this latest story of Donald Trump speaking exclusively to ABC News' George Stephanopoulos and telling him that, yes, I am ready to commit more crime. If you have any crime in your pockets or left over, perhaps stored or lost at the bottom of your glove compartment or stored carefully in a locker for the past couple of years, please send it to me. I love crime, and I can't wait to do another one. That's the word from Donald Trump. He, of course, sees nothing wrong with it, etc., etc. He considers it to be opposition research. I mean, do you want to sit and analyze what it is that he did here and what he was calling for, or are we okay with just recognizing everybody's on the same page? This is not right. I mean, his idea is he'll conflate getting opposition research done by opposition researchers that he hires or who are Americans with being a dumping grounds for intelligence materials, unverified, made up, real, whatever any other countries want to drop on his lap. I think I would take a look at that. I think he would listen. And I never call the FBI in my entire life. And it may be true, I suppose, as other people pointed out to me. Not a lot of mob bosses keep the FBI on speed dial, but I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Maybe if the movies are to be believed, people keep open and direct lines to the FBI from time to time when they need to save their skin. And I don't know whether I would count what Donald Trump is doing as saving his skin. I think he's slowly killing his skin bit by bit, but I suppose he might think that that's what he's up to. It's an interesting thought, of course. And by the way, he never calls the FBI except when he's the president and needs to call them and wave them off of investigating his national security advisor or whatever, or invite him to a nice dinner. The director should come in and we'll have a meal, maybe 6 or 7. You set a place for 6 or 7. No, I mean, I may eat 6 or 7 servings. And then I'll ask him to leave my friends alone and not investigate them. And I don't know. I think last night, by the way, I must have retweeted. I think somebody had, of course, looked over his record. And you know how it is. There's always a tweet. There's always a statement somewhere. And I think somebody found some archival tape of him talking about how he called the FBI one time. And so, never mind. Blah, blah, blah. You know how that was going to go. Oh, it was Jason Leopold. Here it is. So he's, I never in my life, called the FBI, et cetera, et cetera. And then, Jason Leopold letting us know that I guess through some Freedom of Information Act request at some point, I obtained documents that reveal Trump called the FBI in 1982. And that's a while back. He could forget. During a dispute with a New York City housing commissioner whose life was threatened because he wouldn't grant Trump a $20 million tax abatement for the construction of Trump Tower. And, I guess a link included here to BuzzFeed News and a screen grab of the relevant part, reading that the next day, April 21st, Trump himself called the FBI, saying he had received a telephone call from a person who read about Trump's tax abatement problem with Commissioner Gliedman, Gliedman, I don't know, Gliedman. The caller said that someone the name is blacked out in the FBI file, had been shafted by Gleidman and for that reason was going to retaliate. I'm sure lots of people called Donald Trump in 1982 to share his dismay about the failure to get a tax abatement for a not yet constructed Trump Tower. I think John Barron might have been on the other end of that line. But there you go. And I guess it would only show up in a Freedom of Information Act request if he had, in fact, contacted the FBI, because he can't just FOIA the guy's schedule from 1982. It's not like Brett Kavanaugh or something, where, I don't know, I don't think he had to turn that over either, but I don't know. He decided to do that. So lots of justifiable uproar about this, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether to delve into this deeply or not. Certainly now is not the time to do something like this. But so the Twitter feed has been since then, oh my God, can't we just admit that this guy is out of control and that we ought to impeach him? And the typical and now expected tamping down and pushing back. Oh, well, if we do this and the Senate refuses to act, et cetera, et cetera. So just turning up the heat under the impeachment kettle, I suppose, and no solutions to be found today, although I did note that someone was saying that he's getting set to kick off his campaign in Florida pretty soon, Donald Trump, and like I had said in response, everybody's been waiting for the day that Donald Trump kicks off in Florida with bated breath, so I can only hope that it hurries and comes soon. Let the day come soon, I suppose, and it's okay, and you can't kick me off Twitter because of that. All right, good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning.
Good.
How are you?
I am perplexed at having a terrible. Yes,
better
I am.
to be perplexed than impeached is what I'm saying.
That is true, and I hope I do get impeached so that I stay in office forever, and Democrats tell you it's your fault.
Well, that's just impeachy, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I think I was going to talk about two topics today, the impeachment traitor thing and also what's going on in the Democratic primaries. But I think I'll do the primaries after the break, after your introduction, and we'll do the impeachment thing first. So of all the things that Trump could have said, this is the most startling. I mean, he always says things like, oh, my gosh. But this one actually has conservative scrambling.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you have to defend this, like Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity does, I suppose Hugh Hewitt will do as well. I'm waiting for Byron York because all the enablers have to come up with something. I think their line is going to be, he was forced into saying that. It was just filler, said Rick Santorum on TV.
Oh, yes.
Hannity said it was an entrapment question.
George Stephanopoulos, entrapment.
Yeah, they have to come up with something.
I was thinking,
but that's what they seem to be coming up with. So that's their line this morning. Although the rest of the world isn't buying it. Yeah,
I thought they would go with that and just say no. He was saying Democrats are taking information from foreigners.
Right. He was saying that he's going to be in Florida and he sold out his venue by times 10 and prove it if you don't like it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what he was saying.
He did have a lot to say.
Here's how Politico's playbook. If you're going to look at the villagers in terms of how they're reacting,
it's great.
Politico. Trump saying that this is from a Politico feed. Trump saying that he would accept a foreign government's assistance in an election and might not report it to the FBI, which is, by the way, what he said yesterday.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's a stunning statement that would seem out of bounds to any playbook reader. This is coming from Politico Playbook, the morning summary of what happened. The people we spoke to Wednesday night said the president's statement is rooted in a win at any and all costs mentality.
Yes.
Now, that's a subtle but important statement. Okay. Because Trump is amoral.
A moral
and of course,
wreck.
We've seen, mobsters are. I mean, if you're a mob boss, you have to be amoral. The whole idea of trying to shame him about anything is ridiculous because he doesn't think in those terms, assuming he thinks at all. He doesn't react in those terms.
No.
He is amoral, and of course it's win at any and all costs because that's it. Winning isn't the only thing, it's everything. That was Vince Lombardi taken out of context, but Trump didn't take it out of context and says, okay, that's what it is. Yeah. In nearly 10 years of covering Congress, Jake Sherman and who's the other person there, Anna Palmer,
Okay.
have never come across anybody.
Right. They're very lonely.
Yeah, they just stay in the hallways and like nobody talks to them.
That's a weird existence. Yes.
Exactly. Who even privately say that they would accept foreign assistance in an election ever, and members have said crazy stuff to them privately. Trump is right in one element. Oppo research is absolutely a part of every election. It's often not pretty, but that dirt digging is not conducted by foreign governments. The big question, what does this mean for impeachment and for Pelosi's hesitation? We'll see at 10:45 when Pelosi does her weekly news conference. So there is something coming up today where she gets to be on the record, and as you point out, she loves to walk this stuff back. But it's getting harder. And actually, I think that the focus on Pelosi's a little bit misguided. I totally get where it's coming from because she has to, get off the pot and do stuff. But
yes,
what really should be happening now is every single Republican, not Democrat, Republican should be on record as to whether or not they support what Trump said yesterday.
Yes, that is what should happen. Oh, well.
Let's see if it does. Politico's tone makes it sound like they're trying.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Look, if you want to say no statement or I'm not going to speak for the record, print that.
I guess so. Yes.
Do it.
You should.
Go after everybody. Start with McConnell and work your way down. Or start with Justin Amish and work your way up. But however way you want to look at it.
Would you like
get the Freedom Caucus on record for this. We were talking about how they've become radicalized. Let's see how radical they are. Are they going to take the Sean Hannity, he was entrapped into this? Or are they going to take the Rick Santorum, that was just nonsense and filler and you don't have to pay attention to what he says?
Yeah, both equally appealing.
Get them on record. There are elections coming up.
Yes.
Get them on record and see if the voters really are okay with this.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I feel like I have to break in with now breaking news. Donald Trump is awake, so look out. And he's complaining about all the complaints. He just wants you to know that he tweets, I meet and talk to, quote, foreign governments every day. I just met with the Queen of England, and he helpfully encloses in parentheses, UK, after that. And then,
did he show his picture with the Burger King hat on next to her?
They should have put one on his head. But he says also that he met with the Prince of Wales, and guess how he spells Wales? So yeah. Yep. So everyone's having a good time without him. He met the Prince of Wales, so he's got marine life on his side. And
right. Well, King Whale was busy, so it's
hard to understand their opposition research, right?
Yeah. And it went swimmingly. It was a great meeting.
Really? You don't say. Okay. But he goes ahead and lists the rest of them that he's met with. And so something, and he needs to call the FBI. But
right. Anyway, it's a big story. It'll get coverage. And again, my point here isn't what's right and what's wrong. It's what breaks through coverage to actually get discussed. Not so much Prince of Wales, but Trump basically asking in public for help from a foreign power in 2020 because that's what he needed in 2016 to actually win the election.
Right.
So is that impeachable? Well, let's see. George
Scott.
Conway.
Okay.
And Neil Katyal have a op-ed. Trump just invited Congress to begin impeachment hearings.
Oh, well, I can't refuse an invitation.
Right. He filed a brief in the nation's second most important court that takes the position that Congress cannot investigate the president except possibly in impeachment proceedings. It's a spectacularly anti-constitutional brief, and anybody who harbors such attitudes toward our Constitution's architecture is not fit for office. Maybe Armando would argue, okay, take him up on it at his word, start impeachment hearings. Trump's brief is nothing if not an invitation to commencing impeachment proceedings that, for reasons set out in the Mueller report, should have already commenced. Although LOL GOP properly pointed out online, listen, if you want to hide any crime, just stick it in the Mueller report because nobody's going to read it.
That's true. I also cheated on, throw it in there. Put it on page 1. What the hell?
Which brings us to the main point. England's King George III was above the law, but the founders of our republic wanted a system that would divide power and have the branches check one another. The idea that only the president can investigate the president is an argument for autocrats, not Americans. That's the main reason they're arguing. That even happened before the statements last night. Now, Marty Letterman, lawyer,
Yes.
Says law professor at Georgetown University. As always, the most newsworthy story here isn't that Trump believes this or would say it out loud, or even that he'd accuse the FBI director of being naive to suggest compliance with proper norms. Of course he would. He's been doing and saying such things daily for years.
Yes.
By now, none of it can possibly surprise anybody. It's dog bites man, sun rises in east. Now, the real story, the one that ought to be the lead, is that such conduct has become normalized and acceptable conduct for a president of the United States because something like 250 of the 251 Republican legislators and all GOP-appointed officials are perfectly fine with it and choose nothing to do about it. That, rather than Donald Trump's well-known pathology and utter inability to put the public well-being above his own interests, is what's historically significant and what threatens to fundamentally transform our political order. That's kind of a riff on what I was saying. You know, you can't shame Trump, but you can deal with elected officials who otherwise have to run defending this stuff. And that's really where the pressure should be, not on Trump. They'll put pressure on Trump. You can't do that directly because he ignores everybody. But what he can't ignore is when he doesn't have votes.
Yeah. Whoops.
Letterman says, sure, the media has to report Trump's daily outrages, but why aren't they also repeatedly asking every GOP official, this sounds familiar, whether this is the conduct of somebody who's fit to hold the highest and most powerful office in the land, and reporting in banner headlines the shocking absence of any affirmative responses? All of which is to say, the degradation of the institution is the real story. That might not be as sexy or as easy to convey as the dysfunctional rantings of Donald Trump or the ravings of whoever.
Prince of Wales.
I was just listening to a really great BBC podcast this morning about King Canute and telling the waves to stop. And, I just was reminded in that story, which can be interpreted in many different ways. He was humble or he was arrogant. Arrogant kings telling people to do things in a crazy way is kind of apocryphal because that's not how the story started. It was more of a very humble Christian king pointing out that even he can't command the waves. But that's not the part of the story that struck me. What struck me is Canute's family, right? His father was Sven Forkbeard, and his grandfather was Harold Bluetooth. Oh. And, of course, that was the age of Ethelred the Unready, the greatest nickname of all time. And I'm just thinking, Trump didn't start with these nickname things. There were people that in history actually had, some really great ones. When everybody was named Harold, or I guess in France, like everybody was named Charles, you had to distinguish them. There was Charles the Bold, Charles the Fat, Charlemagne.
Right.
You couldn't just call him Charles or Harold because you wouldn't know who everybody was talking about. So, nicknames have a place. And I have to give the Brits credit for that because not only do they have great, wonderful insults to hurl at Donald Trump, they also had like the world's best nicknames.
Yes.
But anyway, I digress. The point there, all of that, is that it's the Republicans who really ought to be on notice, and it ought to be very public in terms of where they stand. So as Jay Rosen points out, two facts are in evidence here. One is Trump would not alert, damning and important. The other, he's declaring it out loud. That's a challenge to the entire system by which we try to hold the powerful accountable, including the press and the person who asked the question. So you got to follow up and deal with the Republicans.
Okay.
Should we impeach? Of course we should impeach. Matthew Dowd points out impeachment is less about demonstrating who the president is and more about demonstrating who we are and what we stand for. I don't see how Trump says something like that yesterday and you don't open up impeachment hearings.
Yeah.
Call him what you want. Call him something different. We all talked about that. And by the way, I think Katyal and Conway in the article also talked about the fact that referring it to the Senate isn't necessarily the end game. Just like Lawrence Tribe had said last week.
Yes.
Just do the hearings. Worry about whether or not you make the referrals later. That's not the point.
That's that's entirely possible. It's catching on. You can take your time with these things.
As I say, and again, Canute is the guy who told the waves to stop, and they didn't listen to him. And I've been telling you, this impeachment thing is a wave. It's tides. You have to recognize that they run on their own accord, and you can't direct them as much as you would like to.
Okay. Well, I will seek not to.
Well, people will demand, but the fact is it'll do what it does. And with Donald Trump keeping on supplying information and fuel for the fire, it ain't going away.
No. Okay, well, we'll have to talk about it probably next week because something.
And the week after, and the week after.
I don't know.
But you know what's happening in 2 weeks? And this will be a little bit of a tease for the after the break segment. You know what's happening in 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks?
Yeah. Presidential debates.
Oh, really?
They're coming.
Pretty close. Okay.
They're very close. They're like round the corner.
Wow.
You think that'll be a topic?
No. I think it'll be disallowed. I think the DNC will say no one is allowed to debate that. I don't know. I'm not sure.
You can't talk about that or climate change.
Yeah, I guess so. They could rule it out because we have to have a laser focus on jobs. By the way, that's going to prevent the only thing
you're allowed to talk about is Hillary's email.
Yeah, but luckily we already have the books on that.
And blogger ethics. You're allowed to talk about those things. Nothing else.
Always. Easy topic. Yeah, I don't know. People are hedging on how to discuss it this morning already. So there will be, about
2 weeks
half the
to figure it out.
Yeah, and there'll be, let's say there's 20-something. So I don't know. Did they decide how many people are going to be on stage yet?
No.
Okay.
There was some polling out yesterday that's going to help with that a little bit, but I don't think that they figured out who everybody's going to be just yet.
Well, they better get on.
They know who the moderators are.
Okay.
I was wondering.
Yeah, they have as many moderators as they have.
I was wondering if the moderators have to reach a certain threshold in the polls in order to be actually accepted.
I guess so. I'm not certain how they made their determinations there, but I don't know whether it seemed like
Rachel Maddow, Lester Holt.
It seemed like a bad idea to have that many moderators, but then I thought maybe you need extra moderators. There's so many candidates, you need to be able to handle them all. Maybe one moderator can't do it. I don't know what the decision was to have. I think they have like 5.
Yep. So Jake Sherman, anyway, back, he's one of those political playbook writers, and in his tweet feed, not the official political one, says, so what's Pelosi going to do? No real reason to believe her reporting indicating she's going to change course. The Mueller report is filled with things Trump did and they're not moving. Why would words sway the top of the party? That's what I heard last night. Why would this change anything? Yeah, also, let's see. The question is going to be, again, what are the presidential candidates saying? Because that's another way to put pressure on Pelosi, not just Trump's own talks in terms of television. And what are the polls saying? And if the polls start to show that talk on impeachment or sentiment for impeachment is rising, then that will also be part of that tide. And I think there was some polling from PRRI yesterday, which I'm going to try to track down.
Yes.
Which talked specifically about impeachment. Their poll happened to be concentrated on growing support for transgender rights, which was rather interesting in and of itself. But the results from their poll, which was released yesterday, believed President Trump should be impeached and removed from office, all 40%. PRRI breaks things down by religion, which is always interesting.
Religion.
Non-white Protestants, 56%. Catholic, 44%. Unaffiliated, 44%. White mainline, 27%. And white evangelical, 27% think that he should be impeached.
Okay.
So, again, it's just a reminder that Trump's base, the 35% of his base that doesn't move, is basically evangelical.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And, that's why
still true.
It's not easy to change. Now, support for impeaching President Trump since fall of 2017, they have a nice nifty little chart I'm going to send you right now at the very bottom, which is also kind of interesting. Based on what you have heard, do you believe that President Donald Trump should be impeached and removed from office? The percent saying yes. Okay. Democrats have gone from 77 to 69 since the Mueller report. And reaction thereof.
What? From where?
And all Americans have gone from 47 to 40. That's the October 18 to April 19th numbers. Okay. What's interesting is that the number of people who have gone up since last year till now are Republicans. They've gone from 11 to 15%. Everybody else is a little bit less enthusiastic about impeachment compared to a year ago.
I guess so. What an odd thing.
So, again, what Pelosi is dealing with is public perception. And you can argue, it's up to her to affect public perception, but it doesn't always work that way. And so I'm not trying to defend her in terms of why she's making this decision. I'm trying to explain her. And you look at polls like this and you say the public is not clamoring for impeachment. Democrats are. But with independents, it's only 36%, and that's dropped from 44% a year ago. And that's what we're dealing with. And if you want to win elections, you got to win independents. And I got people in my caucus she's thinking, like Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey and other people who came from, purple districts, and they're not clamoring for impeachment. And until they do, what am I supposed to do? You can say, okay, do the right thing. But if you're looking at it from her, how do I keep my caucus together? How do I keep the majority? That's what she's thinking.
Yes. Well, yes. And I mean, sometimes it does, as you said, it doesn't always work that way, although sometimes it does, and it works that way in weird ways, like a slight decrease in the number of people who are Democrats saying that they're interested in impeachment, more or less coinciding with the Democratic leadership in Washington saying you ought not to be interested in impeachment.
Well, there are obvious arguments in terms of bad not to impeach. Things that you don't do have consequences. You lose the base on that. The other side of the coin is you can't account for everything. For example, the House had what they hoped would be televised hearings on Monday, and then there was a helicopter crash in New York City, and none of the cable networks covered it.
Yes, there was that. We got to ground all aircraft during the next set of hearings, I guess.
Right. So, you can't plan for everything. But let's take a look at where the Democrats are after the break.
Okay.
As I hear the music starting.
Yes, right. As long as you know where they are, we'll be able to look for them again. They can't get too far in the next 2 minutes, I don't think.
Yeah, if you lose them, go look in Iowa.
That's one place. It's just, this is entrapment, though, if you wait there for them. Okay. Well, we'll catch up with these things and what else the Prince of Wales might be doing. I think that's Aquaman, somebody suggested. So we'll check in with him after the break. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're speaking with the Prince of Wales. I don't know. Greg Dworkin is here. I can't believe this is still going on. Because I guess why not? And other people calling out, trying to draw attention to the fact that he put UK in parentheses after Queen of England, as though there was another one.
Right.
I think Prince of Wales is the thing this morning.
Right. What did he do? He spoke to the Prince of Wales after speaking to the Prince of Darkness, parentheses everywhere.
Yeah, right. All these. What an amazing time we live in, I guess.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Prince of Wales.
Polling. A lot of interesting things happened with people jockeying for position. As I put in the pundit roundup this morning, it's a reminder how early things are. Until you get to about 200 days before the election, and we're more than 500, typically the polls don't mean much of anything and don't have that much accuracy. And that's also true for primary polling. But jockeying for position is still going on in earnest, and I figure earnest must be some small town in Iowa.
Yes.
Because everybody's jockeying there. So
she's one of the
Economist YouGov poll comes out. It's a national poll.
Oh, no, you can't use those.
All right.
Economist YouGov.
We'll get to state polls, but national poll. Biden 26, down 1 since the last week. And here's the big news. Elizabeth Warren is at 16 plus 5, leapfrogging over Bernie Sanders, who's at 12 and down 4. So Warren is in second place nationally. Buttigieg 8 minus 1. Harris 6 minus 1. Harris is kind of stuck. That's also part of the news. You'll see that when we do the California poll. And Beto is 3. And if you're looking at the best favorability ratings, that's favorable minus unfavorable. which is a good idea of sentiment rather than who you think is most electable. Warren's at 50, Biden's at 43, tied with Bernie. Harris at 41, Buttigieg 40, and that's why they're the top 5. Booker's at 34, O'Rourke 31. And by the way, if you correct for name recognition, this is from G. Elliott Morris. Warren is at 61, Buttigieg 60, Harris 56, Booker 50, Biden 49, Julian Castro 47, Sanders 46, O'Rourke 45. These are not good numbers for Bernie.
No, they're not.
Then the new Monmouth, Nevada poll comes out, Nevada.
Monmouth, Nevada. Why? How do they team up? Okay.
Nevada is notoriously difficult to poll, as John Ralston will tell you. These polls mean nothing, he says. But Biden 36, Warren 19, Sanders 13, Buttigieg 7, Harris 6.
Okay.
Right? Again, good numbers for Warren, bad numbers for Bernie, not great numbers for Harris. She's got to do well in the upcoming in 2 weeks debate. That's really where she's going to shine if she's going to. We'll see what kind of effect that has. So you have Nevada poll, you have national polls. And then this morning, we have the LA Times poll of California, UC Berkeley LA Times poll. Okay. Biden 22.
Yes.
This is California. Warren 18. Mm-hmm. Sanders 17. Kamala Harris 13.
Yeah.
Very close race, anybody could win, but some observations here. Even in California, Warren's ahead of Sanders. Those are 3 polls, Nevada, and of course Iowa over the weekend, where the same thing happened. Warren's in second place.
Yeah.
Displacing Bernie. In all of those polls, Biden is in first place, but tenuously, and Harris, even in California, is in fourth. That's her home state.
Yes.
Not good.
Not great. No, I mean, I don't know.
She's not breaking through.
Around
that's why the debates
time.
are going to be so important for her.
They know her, but not for a long time. Okay.
Right. So, Nate Silver has some points to make.
Oh, 538 of them.
Actually, only 3. He does 3 at a time.
All right.
Bullet point number 1. Things are looking up in Iowa for Warren and Buttigieg.
Okay.
Those are their favorability ratings. Nate says, I don't have any hard and fast rule about how much to emphasize favorability ratings against first choice support. It's probably worth noting that Trump's favorables are often mediocre, but he won the nomination anyway. Still, the Seltzer poll is consistent with a story where voters who are paying more attention are ahead of the curve on Warren and Buttigieg. And Warren and Buttigieg are good candidates for Iowa with a legitimate shot to win there. And bullet point number 2, what makes for a good Iowa candidate? Well, you perform well with liberal voters, since voters in the Iowa caucus tend to be pretty liberal.
Yeah. And
perform well with white voters, since Iowa tends to be pretty white.
Yes.
It's one of our rejections about them going first. Be strong retail campaigners with good organizational skills, and be from the Midwest. That's your perfect Iowa candidate.
Yeah. I mean, but just not too close. If you're actually from Iowa, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Warren checks 3 1/4 boxes. She polls well among white liberals. She has strong organization. She sort of counts as Midwestern. If you think of her as being from Oklahoma and you think of Oklahoma as being the Midwest. If you forget that she's from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Those are pretty big ifs. But anyway, Buttigieg also, he overperforms with white voters. He's Midwestern, and by most accounts, he's a good retail campaigner. And Bernie also. He's not from the Midwest.
Well, why not? Maybe he
but
is.
He performs well with liberal voters. He performs well with white voters, and he's a strong retail campaigner.
Yes. It's ridiculous that you wouldn't think I'm from the Midwest. It's a disaster.
Yeah, it's a total disaster.
All right. I don't know why. Why not? He's from the Midwest, too. Go ahead.
Enough of me being from the Midwest. I'm not from the Midwest, okay? I'm not.
Yeah.
Well, it's enough.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to. I don't know about this. Maybe she originally, yes, but I would not. I don't want to play with her identity issues at all.
Well, she probably doesn't either, because she kind of bollocks that up. And that's probably her biggest drag on her campaign at this particular point, which I think she's going to have to address. Bullet point number 3, Biden is falling back to the pack. You see that in the LA Times poll for California.
Yes. Okay.
You see that in the national polls. He's losing a point or 2. Of course, he had his bump. You get an announcement. It's called a bump because you go up, then you come down.
Yeah.
I see Beto O'Rourke today is going after Biden, saying he's from the past and we don't need that, or words to that effect. And my reaction when I saw that is that it means one of two things, or maybe both. One is that Beto's losing, so you attack the front runner. And the other is that maybe he perceives that Biden is vulnerable. And both of those things can be true.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't do that. And again, I think I mentioned on a show the other day, people who were there say that when the lower tier candidates in Iowa with their 19 candidate marathon, everybody gets 2 minutes. When the lowest lower tier people started to attack Biden, it did not go well in the room.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful with that. And I don't put Beto as you know, I think he's been doing fairly poorly, and I don't put him as top tier. I think that's Biden, Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg, and Harris. I think one of those five will be the nominee. I don't know which one.
Fair, I think. In terms of the tiering.
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day, right, with the Final Four and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, if you're limited to that, but there's plenty of reason to think he's underperformed, certainly.
Yeah. So Paul Waldman has a piece. Why is Elizabeth Warren surging?
Why? He
starts, behold, the Elizabeth Warren surge has arrived. Overinterpreting small movements in polls is always dangerous, but if she does continue to rise, there are some particular reasons why, reasons that may help us understand what primary voters are thinking and how the media are shaping the race. So he says, let's be clear, Warren's gains are modest, though we talked about them. But they're consistent with what journalists on the ground in Iowa have been reporting. Warren, a senator from Massachusetts, is drawing some of the largest crowds as she campaigns across the state. Those attending her events testify to her skill in winning people over, her ability to describe policy challenges through effective storytelling, and her seemingly inexhaustible energy and enthusiasm. And then there's the role of the media. For a variety of reasons, Warren's become the favorite candidate of the liberal opinion-writing elite. Even those, like myself, who aren't endorsing any candidate, been complimenting Warren for a while, writing and talking about her in ways that are coming across as good. Buttigieg is the other one who has very good handle the media skills.
Yes.
Right? So it starts as a reaction to her early struggles, explorations of how sexism and problematic ideas about electability might be holding back a candidate, which brings us to what's become Warren's slogan, I have a plan for that.
Yeah.
She may be successfully turning the act of having policy plans into a virtue in and of itself, and that stands apart from the substance of the plans. Now, most Democrats don't, and most voters, as other people have pointed out, don't really care about what's in the plan. They're going to read that like they're going to read the Warren report, the Mueller report. But what they want is to know you have one.
Yes. And
if you give them the impression that you have an idea and you're actually going to work on this, and if you don't have a plan now, you're capable of coming up with one later for the things that we haven't even perceived are going to be an issue, that's highly important. Okay? And there's something else Warren has that wins respect, says Waldman, from those who have covered lots of campaigns and winds up producing better media coverage in subtle ways, a clear, coherent message of the kind most of the other candidates are lacking. A successful presidential campaign message tells voters three things: what the problem is, what the solution is, and why the candidate is the right person to bring us from first to second. In Warren's case, she argues the system's distorted by the interests of the rich and powerful. She wants to reorient it both politically and economically in the direction of everybody else. It's actually kind of a populist thing, only liberal populist. She's the one to do it because she understands what's necessary and has already figured out how to go about it. Or as somebody else said, some of the candidates say you should eat lasagna, and Warren says, you should eat lasagna, here's the recipe, and I'm taking the pots and pans out of the cabinet.
That's an interesting analogy. I've not heard the pasta analogies before.
Right. A coherent message not only persuades voters, it gets you good reviews and journalists covering the race, whether they personally agree or not. And that's not only because they respect a skillfully designed campaign, but because it creates a kind of narrative coherence to the candidate's actions and voter responses. None of this guarantees a result. Warren may be pulling support from Sanders now, but that could change. A significant number of moderates in the party could stick with Biden. A different candidate could catch fire. And everybody has their ups and downs. Everybody has their moments. So this happens to be Warren's.
Yeah. All right. So make the most of it. I guess anybody can catch fire these days.
Right. And there are good reasons why Warren is moving up and why she at least has the potential to keep rising. And, some of the various commenters in the pundit report this morning the pundit roundup that I did, pointed out some other things about Warren. That one of the things that she does really well is she connects with voters by telling a story. She talks about an individual. This is a problem. I know somebody who had opioid problems. You bring this up from the audience, and let me, agree with you that this is an issue. Becomes very empathetic about one-on-one. I hear your problem. Here's another example of that same problem. I want to show you that I'm listening.
Right.
Then, and only then, does she turn to, okay, so here's my plan for how to fix it. She doesn't just show, I've got 17 plans on my website, but it's the empathy retail level, which Biden is also very good at, which Buttigieg is also very good at, that doesn't throw her off message. In fact, she incorporates it into the message as she then goes on to say, okay, and I have a plan for that.
Yeah.
And that, works. And especially in a state like Iowa, it works.
Yes, that's very retail. Tailoring the message to the audience, waiting for them to bring up the problem, and you saying, yes, I know about that.
If anybody saw her town hall with Chris Hayes last week, 2 weeks ago, that's exactly what she did when she got questions from the audience. So you could see her doing it real time. It's on YouTube if you want to go check. But if you want to see how she does it, she's actually very, very good at it. So I've been impressed about how she's become a better retail campaigner, which is an absolute must if you really, if you want to be president. Yeah.
Surprisingly effective, as opposed to saying everything you need to know is in my plan. Go read it.
Exactly. It's in the Mueller report.
Yeah, right. That's where
that means we're not going to read it.
I told you where it was. I have a plan for getting you an Uber ride to the library where you can read my plan.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
So, I think that overall those sorts of things are important. And just to remind people about Iowa, what the Des Moines Register and Seltzer poll did, CNN as well in that,
Seltzer poll.
They listed it, not just who's your first choice, but what they did. They asked their first choice, their second choice, because that's the way the caucuses work, and which of the other candidates they were actively considering.
Right.
And Biden and Warren were basically tied, Bernie in third, Buttigieg in fourth, and Kamala Harris in fifth. Again, those top five. Biden had 23% support compared to Warren's 15. Second choice, Biden was 13, Warren was 14. And both of those are more than anybody else except Harris, who was also 14. But Harris was only 6% first choice. And then they said, who else are you considering? Biden was 25, Warren was 32, Sanders 29, Buttigieg 28, and Kamala Harris 32. So if you said, look, I am picking somebody, and although you're not my first choice, I'll consider you, Warren and Harris do very well.
Yes.
But part of the reason that they do very well there is because they are not people's first and second choice.
Yeah. Well, that counts for something. And, of course, in the caucus situation, you got to clear that threshold. It's interesting, though. I guess Warren, I don't know whether, is it always, I get the sense from recalling past caucuses that 15% is about that threshold.
Yeah.
But maybe it's less.
Harris doesn't quite make it.
Yeah.
Buttigieg, Sanders, Warren, and Biden.
That
goes to
that could change.
That goes to Nate Silver's point that Buttigieg actually is fairly well positioned to surprise people in Iowa.
I guess it's certainly possible. But then, if so, there's 20-something candidates. There should be an awful lot of people forced into considering their second choice or other people that they're open to, and that was a very big number for Warren. It was not the second choice number, but the open to consideration. Yes. 38% is pretty significant.
Pretty significant. Anyway, so you look at it overall, and that's why people are saying, Warren is actually doing fairly well. And we talked about this on the show before this latest slew of polls came out, that Warren seemed to be going up and Bernie seemed to be going down. And I say that linked because of the piece we talked about with Charlie Cook the other day. It's not clear that there's room for Sanders and Warren, both. It's just not clear because they may be the same voters.
I don't know if they are, but I guess it's possible, and it even makes a certain amount of sense. But when are we going to? I don't know. When do we get that data?
Well, actually, we do need that data. I asked G. Elliott Morris that question because he's running the stories about the YouGov poll.
Right.
And he said, basically, the question's going to be, is Bernie pulling from non-college populists and Warren from college-educated populists?
Man, some niche candidates.
Are they different voters or are they the same voter? I mean, that's going to answer the question as to whether there's room for both. Because if Bernie's support is from non-college and Warren's is from college, then there might be room for both, although neither one of those is going to be enough to win. But if one of them can consolidate and kind of poach a little bit from the other, then there's not going to be room for both.
All right. Well, that'll be fascinating once we finally start to get that data.
Right, which we probably won't until there's less candidates.
Right, or less colleges.
Well,
I don't know.
If you have 23 candidates, the subgroups within each one are too small to really make any head nor tail out of.
Yes.
But if, let's say, it comes down to, I don't know, Biden, Warren, and Sanders.
Yeah. Well,
as time goes on, and those are your choice, it'll be, then you can start to get some data on that. Otherwise, you may never have data on it. But something to watch. Bernie had a big speech, talked about being basically the son of FDR. And if you want fair and coherent, Bill from Portland, Maine reminds us, by the way, Elizabeth Warren won the Daily Kos straw poll for the first time this week. And that's the first time Bernie hasn't been on top.
Yeah.
It's just an internet poll, but, it's a poll of the activists, and it's kind of interesting to see where the sentiment is. And it's just another data point about Warren going up and Bernie going down.
And, yes, and Bill's other note here, I noticed that you can get your own data points by coming to Netroots Nation in a month from today in Philadelphia. Warren, among the 400,000 candidates, says there'll be a presidential candidates forum at Netroots Nation. Some of our favorite Netroots Nation moments took place at those candidate forums, and I guess they're doing it again, and I don't know how many of the 15,000 candidates they can fit in the hotels, but I guess you got your opportunity. So
among the great points of interest that happens at those sorts of things is David and I get to have breakfast together and chat.
Those things do sometimes happen.
Yeah, but in any case, that's my segment for today pretty much. I just wanted to set the stage. We have a lot of impeachment pressure.
Yes.
There ought to be more pressure on Republicans, and I hope and expect to see at least some of that. It's not just on Democrats. And at the same time, Biden is still keeping his lead, but he's a vulnerable frontrunner, as all frontrunners are at this stage. He is not Jeb Bush, but somebody's going to have to catch him or he's going to win. And right now, people are jockeying for second, third, and fourth because only the top five are really going to come out. And, if there's a final four, it's because Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are in the same lane, same division, and only one will come out on top. So that's it, and I'll be back on Monday, right? You don't have anybody else graduating?
Not this time, no. Maybe a whale.
Maybe you can have somebody else graduate.
Yeah, I'll go
borrow
to
a kid or something. It's summer.
Right. There's really no reason why I couldn't. You can probably crash a lot of graduations and just do things that way.
Oh, by the way, I'll just end with this. Mark Murray has a nice tweet here. Just a reminder, foreign interference in 2016 did matter. It led to the ouster of the DNC chair. Hacked emails and all. It produced HRC versus Bernie chaos at the Democratic Convention. It launched scores of negative stories about internal Clinton communications. And Trump said WikiLeaks some 140 times in the last month of the campaign.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Send me that tweet so I can have everybody read it. And
I will do that.
I'll let everybody
And
know.
otherwise, I will talk to you on Monday.
Okay, very good. Have a great weekend. Talk to the prince of any marine mammal you choose.
Prince of Darkness, Prince of Tides.
Country. Right. It's true. They're probably
Fresh
related.
Prince of Bel Air. Just find a prince and talk to them.
Right. You fill the rest of the show with that. I won't, but thank you for trying. Okay.
No, I think that the rest of the show could be filled up with the what's more popular than Trump. I love the root canal. 47, Trump 42, being stuck in an elevator, 49, Trump 41. That kind of stuff.
Beached whales, right? Could be.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
Take
great.
care. Think
Thank
of breakfast and Pop-Tarts, and I'll talk to you.
Okay. Great. Thanks again. Good roundup. We're ready to roll on the rest of the stories. Do we do the serious ones or lightning round to the crazy ones. I mean, Prince of Wales. Oh my God. Anyway, a good point being made here, by the way, that I don't know. Is this the way it works? Is the fact that he capitalized, or whoever did the tweeting, capitalized Wales, does that rule out it having been changed by autocorrect? I mean, that would be your first guess, unless you knew for a fact, say, that Donald Trump was a complete moron and that he might have done it on purpose. But I'm wondering, I'm not certain, now that I think about it, it seems like the sort of thing that capitalizing it should sort of trip the algorithm to saying, all right, this is something that they're doing on purpose. But you can hit I have a feeling, I feel like I've had things autocorrect with capitalization before anyway. It just capitalizes the wrong word and substitutes that in, but I'm not certain about that. So maybe an expert in screwing up tweeting could let us know how that one works. All right, other fun stories that have occurred via Twitter in the last 12 to 24 hours. This is an interesting one. I think we can do this relatively quickly. There's a story this morning, a small-time sort of story, I would guess, but felt like fun to share. Jack Fleming bringing this one to our attention, an LA Times real estate reporter, in fact, luxury real estate reporter, though has some political background as well, apparently previously at Politico Europe, which is interesting to note that there even was a Politico Europe. In 2016, it says here, Trump's attorney, one of many, convinced Los Angeles' assessment board that his Beverly Hills home, did you realize he had one? He had several, actually. His Beverly Hills home was worth $6 million, saving him thousands in property taxes. It just sold, this is why it's a thing, for $13.5 million. So in 2016, he said it was worth $6 million. In 2019, he sold it for $13.5 million. And LA was basically gypped out of a couple, I don't know what kind of property tax rate they were getting, but gypped out of a couple bucks anyway. But it's their own fault for accepting Trump's attorney's word for how valuable that plot was. There's a picture of it and everything. There's some somewhat, I mean, it's fascinating on a on a micro level, I guess. But then there are some actual chin strokers in there as well. Let's take a look at the story. Donald Trump's Beverly Hills home, man, quietly sells. And can you imagine selling something quietly for Donald Trump for $13.5 million? I think the Donald Trump slip comes to mind because of something I read in skimming the article. And we'll highlight it when we get there. President Trump has visited California 3 times since entering the White House, but he'll have one less place to stay for the next trip. Does anybody remember did he stay overnight in California in his previous visits? And if so, did he stay in any of these homes? Or did he go to a hotel? Or did he get back on the plane and sleep? I think, my recollection, it seems to me that he loves to jump on the plane and get the hell out of California as soon as possible, and he sleeps on the plane, or doesn't sleep and bothers his staff, depending on which plane it is he's flying on. The Trump Organization has quietly unloaded one of its last 2 properties in Los Angeles County, a Tudor-style home in Beverly Hills, of course, for $13.5 million in an off-market sale. And this is what makes some of it so interesting. The company, it's a sale as between companies. The company that they're talking about right now is the Trump Organization. The company bought the home for $7 million in 2007 when it was controlled by Trump. Now note that he bought it for $7 million in 2007. And in 2016, his lawyer, 9 years later, is arguing that it actually is worth $1 million less than he paid for it in 2007. And it works, which is amazing. Anyway, so the company bought the home, not him, because he's not rich. His company is, or claims to be. When it was controlled by Trump, it's now run by his two sons, Eric and Donald Trump Jr., sort of course. A corporate entity has bought the home again. So, question marks about this one. Hillcrest Asia Limited. Now, that seems wrong to cast aspersions simply because the name of an entire continent, and the most populous continent, I think, in the world at that. But and I don't know about that even now that I say it. I mean, Africa's pretty huge. Is it more populous? I don't know. It seems like Asia is the most populous. It has to be, right? Doesn't the two? Well, I don't know. Look it up. Somebody can tell me. But Hillcrest Asia Limited is the buyer, according to the real estate records. And I only raise it because there seems to be some kind of strange espionage emoluments thing going on with not a small number of Asian countries and Trump. So I have some questions. The house was built in 1927. The two-story home sits across from, and this is actually somewhat relevant, sits across from the Beverly Hills Hotel and Will Rogers Memorial Park on North Cannon Drive. 5 bedrooms, 6 baths, blah, 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 all that stuff. It's a, nice size house. 5,395 square feet, a 0.67 acre plot expanded to a hedged lawn and swimming pool out back. It looks very nice from the aerial photography. It raises eyebrows because it's across the street from the Beverly Hills Hotel, where, of course, Trump had a couple of his liaisons with a couple of his liazees, I guess. And you would wonder perhaps why you would maintain a home across the street from your favorite hotel in the neighborhood. But, whatever, no accounting for taste. I just think it was kind of weird. Well, there's more weirdness about this stupid house, and I'll get to it briefly after a 1-minute break. How about that? Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I am reliably informed by Brian Monroe that Donald Trump has very quietly, of course, corrected his spelling of Wales, and so that's nice. I'm glad he got around to doing that. And I'm curious now whether perhaps Prince of Wales was projection of some sort, since everything is projection with him. You never know with this guy. Let's get back to the weird story of the house in Beverly Hills that Trump or corporate Trump is selling to another corporation, Hillcrest Asia Limited. Very interesting. But here's the more important part in terms of weirdness. It's a very nice looking, well manicured looking house, but apparently an old picture of it, I'm not really sure, or I can't tell, or else maybe the colors are more muted than I would have expected. The house, it says, previously sported a dark gray color, and you might wonder why that's even important in reporting at all. And the answer is that the rest of the sentence says that it was painted orange during Trump's ownership, according to sources familiar with the property, which is amazing. I mean, unless you count the fact that he paints himself orange, as possibly indicative of maybe he wants to paint everything he's got orange. I don't really know. Maybe it's a particularly pale orange. I'd love to know how that looked in the neighborhood and what other property owners in the neighborhood thought of that one. That strikes me as the sort of thing that the local property owners would frown upon, but maybe it was hidden behind the hedges. But what an odd thing. It's either an odd thing for him to do or the most natural thing in the world, considering, again, that he paints himself orange. I don't know what to say about that. The fact that he continues to do that. I had to remark on the video that was released with the George Stephanopoulos things yesterday. There were a number of things that were weird in that interview. One, of course, got everybody's attention where he said, "Oh yeah, I'll take foreign help again." The other one was that he had the weird two-tone paint job going again and was sitting around with the puffy pink chameleon eyes thing happening from the reverse raccoon spray tan eye socket thing. And it's really disturbing. And I think everyone should take note of that. Greg has sent something on here. Let's see. Brendan Nyhan noting via Twitter that even Fox and Friends won't defend what Trump said. So, okay, that should be fun. And we'll see how this stuff develops over the course of the day. Is there anything else of interest about this crazy house? I don't know. I mean, it's just sort of an interesting case study that thing is out there. It's a short article, so I'll tell you what else there is there. Maybe we'll discover some other hidden gem here. The corner lot estate sits at the intersections of, if you want to go check it out, Sunset Boulevard, Rodeo Drive, and Cannon Drive. A hot spot for Trump. I'm not certain why, other than the fact that the Beverly Hills Hotel is there, I guess. Or else, just famous street names, and maybe that drew him to this thing. In addition to frequenting the Beverly Hills Hotel over the years, he previously owned a Greek Revival-inspired mansion on a neighboring lot that he sold in 2009 at an $850,000 loss. Was it the neighboring lot to this one, or a neighboring lot to the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is across the street? I'm not sure exactly what he meant. You can see this aerial photo of the neighboring lot. Is that Greek Revival? I can't really tell. Surprising that he didn't tear the two down and combine them into one giant estate there, but okay. So the value of the property on North Cannon Drive has been a point of interest over the years. In 2016, Trump's tax attorney, Wade E. Norwood, argued that the home was worth $6 million, less than half the price it just sold for. Following the appeal, the county's assessment board valued the estate at $6.004 million, according to L.A. County records. They couldn't get it down to the $6 million. They just had to tack on an additional, $4,000? How interesting is that? Is that right? Is that $4,000? Yeah, I think so. It's not the first time Norwood has made such a case. In 2002, Trump shelled out $27 million for a golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes, overlooking the Pacific Ocean, which is now known as the Trump National Golf Club, Los Angeles. He said he spent nearly $300 million restoring the 300-acre property, including repairing the 18th hole, which slipped into the ocean after a landslide in 1999 and drove the previous owners into bankruptcy. Hope it happens again, I guess, but not with anybody on it, unless he's there. Following the renovations, Norwood claimed the course was worth $10 million. So again, I paid $27 million. I spent $300 million renovating it. And after that, he tells the tax guys it's worth $10 million. He's put $327 million in. He lost $317 million on the deal. That's entirely possible. I'm just saying this seems to be a pattern with him. As first reported by The Real Deal, the sale of the North Cannon Drive home leaves the Trump National Golf Club in Rancho Palos Verdes as Trump's only remaining property in the L.A. area. I don't know why that's important, but there you go. I don't know. That seemed like an interesting story. Just, more grifting from this guy, this effing guy. I think we've had enough of him. All right, let's see. Other items in the news/Twitter stream. I think I'll stick with the Twitter stream for a second here because I feel like there's a couple other things we want to scroll back on and look into. Oh, yes. So one of the other weird things that came up in the interview with George Stephanopoulos, besides, yes, I will cheat in the next election, is he's got another fabric swatch project going on. President Trump, it says, unveils his new patriotic paint job for Air Force One during a one-on-one with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos. And I guess he's particularly proud of this, and he's got plans drawn up, and he's playing President Barbie Dreamhouse again, and that's what he likes to spend his time on. I'm going to paint Air Force One slightly different colors. Remember, it is already basically blue and white. He wants to paint it red, white, and blue, I'm sure. And that's exactly where we need to be spending our money in this country. What a perfect approach to everything. Okay, I don't know. I found that kind of strange that he would spend time on that in the White House Oval Office interview. But that's Trump for you. That's kind of what he's going to be spending his time on. All right. I feel like there was a bit more hiding in the Twitter feed here. Maybe I can comb through that during the next break. We'll switch over to Pocket for the moment and bring you the stories that I've been hiding there. Maybe I should go to this one first, having besmirched the entire continent of Asia briefly a few moments ago because of the espionage activities of really just a few Asian people, and I really shouldn't tar them all with this activity, but here's why. News from the Miami Herald letting us all know with actual facts reporting and understanding of the situation on the ground, whereas I simply speculate. But letting us know that there was fact behind our not entirely baseless speculation about what was going on with the Chinese visitors, various Chinese visitors to Mar-a-Lago. With classified filing, feds eye national security case against Mar-a-Lago intruder, report Jay Weaver and Sarah Blasky for the Miami Herald. Let's get right down to it. And this is part of, I guess, a whole series dedicated to, as they say, Trump tourism, access for sale. I guess I'll read you the little blurb that promotes their whole series here. Maybe that way you will, click on the Miami Herald a couple hundred times and give them their due for this work. The Miami Herald is investigating how U.S. President Donald J. Trump, did you know he was that? Has become a favorite target of a little-known Chinese industry peddling access to the rich and powerful. At the center of this Trump tourism is Cindy Yang, a former Asian day spa owner who sold access to Mar-a-Lago and the White House, raising concerns about national security. And so let's begin with this installment of this series. Federal prosecutors disclosed this week they are developing a potential national security case against Yuxing Zhang, the 33-year-old Chinese woman charged with unlawfully entering Mar-a-Lago with a stash of electronic equipment. You remember this story? Yes. They asked a federal judge to allow them to file a classified information under seal without the public or the defendant seeing it. If the motion is granted, prosecutors will present the evidence directly to the federal judge in Zhang's trespassing case during a private closed meeting in the judge's chambers. The prosecution's motion indicates that she is a focus of a widening U.S. probe of possible Chinese espionage, yes, and suggests that authorities have evidence she was likely not simply a bumbling tourist who accidentally found her way into President Donald Trump's private estate in Palm Beach. No, I didn't think so. The motion by a counterintelligence prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office suggests that authorities have relevant classified evidence that could pose a risk to national security should anyone, including Zhang, ever see it. Zhang's case is part of a broader federal investigation into possible Chinese spying at Mar-a-Lago that the Miami Herald revealed is also focused on Republican donor Cindy Yang, who sold access to the president and his family on Chinese social media. Yang is also under investigation by the Justice Department for allegedly bundling contributions from Chinese nationals to Trump's re-election campaign, despite a ban on such foreign contributions. LOL, YOLO, law means nothing. On Tuesday, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin asked U.S. District Judge Roy Altman to allow the government to seal the sensitive evidence in the Zhang case under Section 4 of the Classified Information Procedures Act. In a public notice to the judge, Sherwin indicated that he filed a classified memorandum of law and motion under seal to support his request. The law, designed to protect matters and methods of national security, allows the government to present evidence directly to the judge without disclosing it to the defendant or the public. And that is not the usual procedure, of course. According to Section 4, the court, upon sufficient showing, may authorize the United States to delete specified items of classified information from documents to be made available to the defendant through discovery. According to Harvard Law's Harry Graver, writing for Lawfare blog, the Classified Information Procedures Act establishes a number of key procedures that facilitate a balance between the fundamental rights of defendants in criminal trials and the government's interests in keeping classified information out of the wrong hands. Stephen Aftergood, director for the Project on Government Secrecy at the Federation of American Scientists, who has written about the CIPA, the Classified Information Procedures Act provision, said the nature of the classified evidence in the Zhang case is likely one of two things. Logically, it's either about the facility, Mar-a-Lago, and its security, or it's about her and what the government knows about her and how, Aftergood told the Miami Herald. In the latter case, Aftergood said the government could have information about things like Zhang's travel or her interactions with other parties that may be classified if it was gathered as part of a federal investigation. However, he said, it's too soon to assume the government has implicated Zhang in espionage based on this new filing. All we can say we know for sure is that the case implicates classified information, Aftergood said. Okay, I think that's worth keeping in mind. Miami defense attorney Ken Swartz, who was involved in the high-profile Jose Padilla terrorism case a decade ago, said Zhang can always appeal the judge's decision if he grants the government's motion, but it's very difficult to challenge. The best you can hope for is a summary of the classified information. Swartz also said the prosecution's SIPA filing signals Zhang's trespassing case now, quote, looks like it goes way beyond the indictment and original criminal complaint, unquote. Zhang, who was arrested attempting to enter Mar-a-Lago with a trove of electronics on March 30th, was charged by indictment with two federal crimes, unlawful entry and lying to a federal agent. Although no charges have been brought under the Espionage Act, the prosecutors for the U.S. Attorney's Office have always hinted that the case involved matters of national security. At a hearing on Tuesday, Zhang, against the judge's recommendation, was allowed to fire her defense attorneys and represent herself at trial, after her lawyers with the Federal Public Defender's Office said she was mentally competent to do so. Zhang's trial has tentatively been set for mid-August. Zhang has no formal training in United States law. March 30th was not the first time Zhang had come to the United States to visit a Trump-branded property. I don't think we knew that. As the Herald previously reported, Zhang had traveled to the United States on two previous occasions. Maybe we did read it. I don't know. On in July of 2016 and January of 2017, both times staying at a Trump hotel in New York City. Then in March, she flew to South Florida via Newark Liberty International Airport to visit Mar-a-Lago. Maybe she's just a groupie. Secret Service agents, maybe she's a spy. More likely. Secret Service agents say that when Zhang was questioned, remember this, she first indicated she'd come to the club to use the pool. At a second checkpoint, she changed her story, saying she was there to attend an event. She was arrested when a receptionist checked the registry and no such event existed. Zhang's former appointed public defenders, since fired, presented evidence that Zhang had paid to attend a fundraiser gala originally planned for March 30th. The gala, intended to raise money for children in Africa, back in the news, it's the tension between Asia and Africa, had been billed on Chinese social media by South Florida massage parlor entrepreneur Cindy Yang. Really. As a chance to mingle with the American elite and members of Trump's family. According to her former attorneys, Zhang had bought a ticket from Yang's associate, Charles Lee, who on various occasions had bundled Mar-a-Lago event tickets promoted by Yang into business diplomacy packages, targeting Chinese business people looking for opportunities overseas. According to evidence later presented in court, Lee had informed Zhang prior to her departure from China that the March 30th event had been canceled. Zhang had even asked for her money back. Oh, that is interesting. Trump and his family were staying at Mar-a-Lago for the weekend when Zhang attempted to make entry. At the time of her arrest, however, Trump was not at the club. He was playing golf at the nearby Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach. Because she has discharged her attorneys and remains in custody, Zhang could not be reached for comment. The Federal Public Defender's Office told the Herald it does not comment on pending cases. Okay. Unless it wants to, I suppose. All right. That's an interesting development. I didn't know about that part, that she had already been told that the event had been canceled, and she acknowledged it by asking for a refund and still tried to get in there with a bunch of electronics. First under the excuse that she was going to use the pool, and then after that she was going to the event that was canceled and that she knew was canceled and she had already asked for a refund from. That's just pretty strange. Okay. There are several other stories worth mentioning. Let me address from yesterday. Was it yesterday when we were discussing, I don't even remember what day it was, when we were discussing the blank piece of paper, or seemingly blank piece of paper, being waved around as a secret Mexico agreement. And I mentioned to you that there were some other photos out there that made it look like there really was some text on there. So I grabbed one of the tweets with those pictures. And I guess anything's possible given the knots that the country tied itself in debating whether or not that dress was blue or white. And not to mention the various other strange anomalies that have been distributed across the internet. But I guess it's entirely possible that you could look at things from a different angle and in a different light and see entirely different things. Even so, it was clearly a one-pager and didn't have a great deal of substance on there. But I guess perhaps even more interesting is that, okay, if viewed from a certain angle, it does appear that there's writing on the paper. And once again, sunlight shining through it actually reveals that supposedly secret text. So that's an interesting story all by itself. Ken Vogel, New York Times reporter, was tweeting that picture around that made it look like there was plenty of writing on there after all. Trump, though, I guess was then asked about that. You said you wanted to keep the content secret, and you waved it around in such a way that people were able to, as we mentioned, was a possibility, take a photo of it and enhance the photo or zoom in on the photo and read the thing. So there you go. He's tweeting that one around. Hey, that's weird. Here's the tweet. Trump on the photograph of him waving the secret trade deal with Mexico, revealing some of its contents. That was not anticipated. I didn't do it on purpose. But he's a pretty dumb guy. So that happened. Somebody spent some time trying to figure out and type out as much of that one page as was visible in the photo. I don't know that there's anything all that exciting about it. So we'll probably skip that for now and come back to it later. Oh, no, we can't really handle this one now. I've got a call for updating Flash right in the middle of the show. We really, that's just not the time for that. Okay, let's see. A couple of other stories that we want to turn to. I think it's probably important to note this one. Apparently, when we said yesterday that it had been however many days since Trump had a defense secretary, and then noting that he had insisted publicly that he did already nominate a formal replacement for his long since departed defense secretary. And then we found out, no, he didn't. And it became another paperwork story. Once again, oh yeah, I made that nomination. No, you didn't. Show me the paperwork. Oh, yeah. Well, now that he knows that he didn't, apparently the reasoning for the delay is becoming a little bit clearer. NBC News reported yesterday Trump may be having second thoughts about Shanahan as defense secretary. While in Europe to commemorate D-Day, it says by way of subtitling here, Trump asked at least 3 people if they had any suggestions for different candidates, 4 sources said. Carol Lee, Courtney Kube, and Leanne Caldwell reporting this story. President Donald Trump appears to be having second thoughts about his choice of Patrick Shanahan as his next Secretary of Defense, and asked several confidants in France, presumably American confidants, but who knows, last week about alternative candidates, according to 4 people familiar with the conversations. The White House announced on May 9th that Trump had decided to nominate Shanahan, who served as acting defense secretary since January, but the White House has yet to formally submit Shanahan's nomination to the Senate. Never believe he's finished his paperwork, no matter what he tells you. While in Normandy last week to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day, Trump asked at least 3 people what they thought of Shanahan. Were any of them whales? I don't know. And if they had suggestions for different candidates, the 4 people familiar with the conversation said. They said Army Secretary Mark Esper was discussed as a possible replacement nominee should Trump decide to pull back his Shanahan announcement. Why? Not sure. Esper was among the candidates whom Trump had previously considered for the defense secretary job. Asked by NBC News on Tuesday about Shanahan's nomination, Trump said he, quote, put it out officially, unquote, weeks ago, and now the acting secretary has to go through the process. In a statement, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Buccino, or Buccino, depending on how he pronounces it, spokesman for Shanahan, said Acting Secretary Shanahan is focused solely on our military operations, the highest quality care for our service members and their families, and implementation of the National Defense Strategy, i.e., I'm not interested in whether or not I've been nominated. Sure. White House officials told allies last month that Shanahan's formal nomination would be sent to Congress on May 18th. Very soon, 2 weeks. Shanahan's team at the Pentagon expected it late last week, according to 2 defense officials. The people familiar with the president's conversations about Shanahan last week said he didn't articulate what is giving him pause about his decision, because he couldn't. But they said he made it clear he's wondering if there's another option. Sure there is. There's millions of other people out there. He has no champion. One person close to Trump said of Shanahan, no one is fighting for him. Very saddened by this. One U.S. official said the FBI process for updating Shanahan's security clearance is not yet complete. I mean, you think that's really a problem? Is that an issue if the defense secretary can't get a security clearance? Shanahan has had a security clearance as acting secretary and the deputy defense secretary prior to that. The FBI's current review is an update of his existing clearance, officials said. Wonder what he's been up to. Trump's private solicitation of opinions about alternatives for Shanahan doesn't mean he will ultimately choose a different nominee. The president often asks aides and confidants for their thoughts on a staffer he's second-guessing at the moment, without that individual being immediately forced out. But a time lag between an announcement that Trump intends to nominate someone for a job and a formal nomination has sometimes meant the end for a would-be nominee. Trump publicly announced he'd recommended former 2016 presidential rival Herman Cain to serve on the Federal Reserve Board, but later backtracked after questions about Cain's qualifications for the job. Did he run in 2016? Cain, I thought he ran in 2012, but not 16, but I don't know if I remember that clearly or not. Who knows? Maybe, and I just didn't take note of it. Other times, the White House has submitted a formal nomination to the Senate, and Trump has later withdrawn the pick, such as in April, when he reversed course on Ron Vitiello as head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement because he wanted to go in a tougher direction. I don't know if he actually ever did or not. 6 Trump picks are awaiting formal nomination, according to the Partnership for Public Services Political Appointee Tracker. The list includes Shanahan, Barbara Barrett as Secretary of the Air Force, and Mark Morgan as the Director of ICE. Shanahan was on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, meeting with some of the senators on the Armed Services Committee, including Tim Kaine and Tom Tillis. Shanahan was not Trump's first choice for the nomination, administration and congressional officials have said. Among Trump's concerns was that Shanahan lacks the strong presence in person and on television, of course, that he believes a defense secretary should convey. According to people who have discussed the matter with the president, Trump vacillated for months on whether to pick Shanahan, officials said, and then just didn't do any of the work, I guess. They said he settled on Shanahan after several of Trump's allies in Congress and outside the White House urged him to permanently fill the role because an acting secretary is not seen as having the full confidence of the president. The May 9th announcement of Shanahan's pending nomination came from White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders on Twitter, so you know what that means again. Oh yeah, definitely making the nomination. Definitely not. Based upon his outstanding service to the country, yada yada, Acting Secretary Shanahan proven over the last several months is beyond qualified to lead the Department of Defense. He'll continue to do an excellent job, except he's not actually going to nominate the guy for some weird reason. While Shanahan has struggled to gain allies in Congress or completely win over the president, he has enjoyed the support of at least one senior White House official, National Security Advisor John Bolton. Bolton has backed Shanahan in part, officials said, because he views him as someone who will go along with whatever Trump wants. Wow, what a perfect qualification. That probably wraps up that story. I'll skim it during the break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess there are just a few more items maybe that are worth reading through the end of the NBC article on the Shanahan nomination. A former, there was, of course, the note that Bolton still supports Shanahan because he thinks that Shanahan is a guy who'll go along with whatever Trump wants, and that'll keep the president comfortable. It's not really great for the country, but whatever. A former senior administration official who remains close to the White House said one of the reasons for the delay in Shanahan's nomination is it's been tougher than expected to detangle Shanahan from his time as an executive at Boeing and his other previous business relationships. Wow, it's always tougher than expected for these guys. What a strange thing. Shanahan's defense of the Pentagon's contracting process for a $10 billion federal contract to build its, let's get this one, Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure, or JEDI. So this program could also be raising questions on both Capitol Hill and with the president. I doubt it, the official said. Members of Congress have raised concerns about the contract, which critics say has been tailor-made for only one company, Amazon, a company Trump has routinely criticized. Now that could really be something. I was going to say, the only thing that I could see getting in the way for Trump about contracting information is that it wasn't going to a friend of his. But I suppose it's just as good for Trump as a reason to intervene if it's going to an enemy of his. Of course, you all know about the ownership of Amazon. Let's see. Senator Grassley, who's chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, is waiting for answers from the Defense Department on the contracting program. The JEDI thing is definitely on people's minds, a former administration official said. In the nearly 5 weeks since Trump announced Shanahan as his choice, some daylight has emerged publicly between the two men. Shanahan differed from the president in his assertion that North Korea's recent short-range ballistic missile tests violate United Nations resolutions. Those were short-range missiles, and those are a violation, Shanahan recently told reporters. 2 days earlier at a press conference in Japan, Trump had said the tests were not a violation, because he's an idiot. My people think it could have been a violation. I view it differently. Wonderful. Just another great example of what an idiot he is. Around the same time, Shanahan also announced that his staff would investigate a White House request that the Navy keep the USS John McCain out of the president's sight during his visit to Japan. I would never dishonor the memory of a great American patriot like Senator McCain, Shanahan said. Trump, however, called the request well-meaning and made clear, as he has many times, how he feels about the late Arizona senator. He's not a big fan of John McCain in any way, shape, or form, Trump said. Shanahan, who has no military experience, later announced he would not order an inspector general's investigation into the matter. I'm going to have an inspector general look into the matter. I think it's all right. I am not going to have that happen, says Shanahan. Okay. Well, maybe Bolton's right. Shanahan served as Mattis's deputy until the latter resigned at the end of December over a string of policy differences with Trump. At the time, Trump hailed Shanahan's elevation to acting secretary, calling him very talented. Patrick has a long list of accomplishments while serving as deputy and previously Boeing. Trump wrote on Twitter, he will be great, except I now just not going to nominate him. We're just going to kind of sit on that one like every other nomination in this administration and then accuse the Democrats of not taking it up in a timely fashion, even though that's not their job. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Things that we can fit in here, things that make thematic sense. There's an awful lot. We'll probably save for tomorrow and see if maybe Armando wants to jump in on it. The analysis of Trump's lawyers' latest filings with the D.C. Circuit Court that Greg mentioned. Once again, the filing making zero sense in the legal sense, in the traditional sense of making sense, I guess, to overuse the word sense a little bit more. I just want to point out that, we'll discuss it tomorrow. But I think, again, it's one of those things where they're just like, throw everything, see what sticks. You never know with the D.C. Circuit and the Supreme Court later whether they're going to honor traditional judicial interpretation of anything. So what the hell? And if they don't, or if they do decide to stick with traditional legal interpretation of things and the president loses this case, he lives from day to day. He just wants a delay. I saw somebody saying the other day, this is such an outrage. It doesn't reflect any normal person's understanding of the law. You can't just wave a magic wand. For instance, I think they were actually talking about the executive privilege assertion with respect in particular to the census question information that's now come out, and saying it's not just executive privilege isn't a magic wand that you just wave at things to make problems go away. And it's not supposed to be. But I think that's in a traditional world. And I think in this one, it might just be enough for Donald Trump to say, I know that it doesn't work that way ultimately, but like I say, I'm living day to day, maybe even hour to hour, meal to meal, certainly. And quite honestly, anything that gets me to the next meal time, I'm in favor of. So is executive privilege a magic wand that you can just wave at things and make them go away? It is for the time that it takes a court to tell you have absolutely no idea what executive privilege really is and what it can really do. But while you're waiting for that to happen and then waiting to exhaust all the appeals on it, it is a magic wand if all you care about is getting through the day without actually being hauled off to jail. And if you also happen to wield enough influence with the Supreme Court and seed it with people who don't care about anything and are just ultimately pro-Trump nihilists, then I guess you might eventually get away with it. And or all of your understanding of American law and what it means and what it entails to study the body of it, the history of it, and carry it forward as canon is out the window. That's just, something that it could happen. You never know. And watch out if you've spent a long time studying what the law is and how it works. You're going to be upset in the end. All right. Well, that's, I don't know. I'm not certain, like I said, how to wind up the show, but I have, this is an interesting twist. Let's throw this one out there just for fun and stick with a theme of China just for a moment. This is sort of an esoteric turn and not something we would ordinarily do in a roundup of our top news items, but that's something that makes doing the show sort of off the cuff so much fun. I have an old Harper's Magazine article here, and I guess it's my one shot at Harper's for the month. They're very strict with their firewalling. But it comes from the November 2015 issue, so it's not current news. But it came up in a discussion I witnessed taking place on Twitter, of course, and struck me as rather interesting. Just an interesting look at China, what they're up to, and what we're up against when we deal with them, and I guess how dangerous it can be when the current president is an idiot, for one thing, and also sort of weirdly China bribe curious, and in the middle of a trade war with them, and what could happen as a result. So this is interesting. The New China Syndrome is the name of the article. American Business Meets Its New Master, says the subhead, by Barry Lynn. So thought you might, let's read through this. I found it fascinating reading over the weekend. I don't know if we're going to be able to get through it or not, but let me give you a taste of it. This may seem an odd moment, back in 2015, I guess, to sound the alarm about China. In the past few months, again, 2015, we have seen the near collapse of the country's stock market, the devaluation of its currency, and the sputtering of its mighty industrial sector. But long term, the picture has hardly changed. China will soon pass the United States to become the world's largest economy. Have we gotten there yet? By some measures, it has done so already. Wages and consumption remain strong. The service and online retail sectors are hot, and vast portions of the population have yet to buy their first car or iPhone, all of which is to say that China, however challenged, remains as attractive a market as ever for many corporations. This also means that basic patterns of behavior are unlikely to change anytime soon, and many of China's recent actions are disturbing in the extreme. Consider its growing bellicosity in Asia. Over the past couple of years, Beijing has unilaterally declared an air defense identification zone over most of the East China Sea, parked a drilling rig off Vietnam, encouraged fleets of fishing boats to anchor around inlets long claimed by Japan, and build entirely new islands on reefs claimed by the Philippines. The expansionist itch has been so reckless, so assertive, that Japan's prime minister recently compared China to Germany circa 1914. How do you like that one? I wasn't thinking we were going to go to 1914 on that. While what we have largely missed, though, this article argues, is the emergence of a similar bellicosity within China, directed not at other nations, but at foreign corporations operating inside its borders. When American corporations succeed in China, the result is not a mutual sense of comfort and familiarity, such as Toyota now enjoys in the United States. Instead, we see a tightening of control and increasing efforts to bend these powerful commercial institutions to the will of the men who run the Chinese state. It's interesting, and if we can get far enough into the article, it makes a certain point in a particular way that I would ordinarily jump to myself here, but I know it's coming later on. Rio Tinto, the world's number 2 supplier of iron, was among the first targets of this approach. In 2010, global prices for metals were spiking, and China's state-owned steel mills pressed the corporation for a discount rate on iron ore. Rio Tinto refused, and meanwhile began selling ore to a few privately owned mills in the country. In response, Beijing simply, get this one, ready? Charged 4 executives in the company's Shanghai office, including an Australian citizen, with capital crimes. The tactic seems to have worked. While the 4 sat petrified in a Shanghai courthouse that March, Rio Tinto CEO Tom Albanese was in Beijing to, as one journalist put it, pay homage to China's leaders. A couple of weeks later, a deal was struck on the pricing of iron ore. That's scary. Another early target was Walmart. Don't always feel too bad about them, but let's read this one. In October of 2011, authorities in, Chongqing, charged the corporation, which at the time controlled some 10% of China's hypermarket sales, with mislabeling pork products. Let's recall that Walmart was, and is, the world's largest company in terms of revenue. This didn't discourage the Chinese from jailing 2 of Walmart's employees, putting 7 more under house arrest, and closing all of its outlets in Chongqing for nearly 2 weeks. What made the intervention especially telling was where it took place and when. Chongqing is one of 4 cities in China directly controlled by the central government, which means the decision to target the U.S. company likely carried the imprimatur of the Politburo. The action also coincided with the publication of a long article in The Atlantic that purported to show how Walmart was cleaning up China's food supply chain by fighting pollution, adulterated foods, and corruption. How Walmart Conquered China, read the headline on the magazine's cover. In one stroke, Chinese officials made clear exactly whose practices needed cleaning up and who had conquered whom. Some observers believe that Chinese authorities target foreign corporations merely for mercenary ends. Their goal, this thinking holds, is to grab patents for Chinese companies or to shake a little cash into national or personal coffers. These quiet aggressions often do result in measurable commercial advances. Beijing held up Glencore's takeover of Xstrata, I'm guessing is the pronunciation of Xstrata, an Anglo-Swiss mining operation, until executives agreed to transfer control of a lucrative Peruvian copper mine to a Chinese company. It's just a straight shakedown, but by the state. How interesting. A lawsuit against InterDigital, which manages a vast portfolio of wireless patents, led that corporation to grant special treatment to Chinese enterprises. Litigation against the chipmaker Qualcomm had a similar effect, and in that instance, Beijing tacked on a $975 million fine. But the Chinese increasingly appear to aim at more direct forms of control over foreign companies. In China, there is no independent judiciary, no rule of law. Oh no. No real property rights, and certainly no corporate free speech rights. Hence, one way for Chinese functionaries to control a foreign enterprise is simply to habituate its executives to the lash of arbitrary power masquerading as law. Just about any law can serve the purpose. Last year, Beijing used anti-corruption statutes to fine the pharmaceutical company GlaxoSmithKline, sorry, I don't know why I reversed those, nearly $500 million. Need hard cash, hard currency? Make something up, make a fine for somebody. The year before, the tool of choice was a new anti-monopoly law, which Beijing wielded during a sort of mass shaming of foreign executives. Functionaries from the National Development and Reform Commission reportedly summoned in-house lawyers from some 30 companies, including GE, IBM, Intel, Microsoft, Siemens, and Samsung. Once everyone was in the room, officials announced that half the companies present were already under investigation for monopoly crimes, but didn't say which. According to the Reuters journalist who broke the story, the officials instructed the managers to write down public, quote, self-criticisms, a Maoist practice designed to coerce individuals into confessing wrongdoing in advance of any trial. A Chinese regulator made the consequences clear. If any company resisted, he might double or triple its fine. This predilection for mass shaming is not confined to the boardroom. In recent years, China's state-run television station, CCTV, has produced what is known as the 315 Gala, an annual consumer rights program in which the hosts finger foreign companies for their bad behavior. Hewlett-Packard, Starbucks, and McDonald's have all taken turns in the dock. In 2013, one of the main targets was Apple. At first, the world's most valuable corporation refused to flinch. But after the People's Daily and other state-owned media orchestrated another frenzy of criticism, Apple CEO Tim Cook, or Tim Apple as the president calls him, delivered a formal apology to Chinese consumers, promising them a profound reflection. on the company's repair and warranty policies. Actually, that's not a bad idea there, China. Good job. Very interesting. Are we able to get to the next page, or are we going to be blocked from it by... you should be able to at least read all pages of the article you're interested in, don't you think? Here we are. Before we rush to excoriate the Chinese for interfering with private businesses... Oh, does this mean we came in on page 2 of this thing rather than page 1? How interesting is that? Before we rush to excoriate the Chinese for interfering with private business, we should remember that for most of our own history, we in America have done much the same thing. Here, too, country has long trumped company. And this is another fascinating aspect of this article. A relatively recent myth argues otherwise. It holds that Americans have always allowed actors in the economy to do exactly as they pleased, without any form of regulation, and that the result of this laissez-faire policy was a nation glorious and grand. There is no truth to this myth. From the first, the founding generation recognized that the only way to achieve real liberty for the individual was to use the power of the state to prevent the infringement of that liberty, be it at the hands of private monopolists at home or the mercantilists abroad. Henry Adams captured this paradox in the history of the United States during the first administration of Thomas Jefferson, that being the title of his work. Not the time period he's discussing, but that too, I guess. No American has ever decried government power more eloquently than Jefferson, but on taking office, on the cusp of the Napoleonic Wars, Jefferson confronted a world in which most trade was micromanaged by London or Paris. His response? He threatened to divert vital goods from one European power to another as a way of guaranteeing the independence of American traders and, more important, of the nation itself. The United States at the time was a small country, so this initial effort had limited effect. But looking ahead, Jefferson imagined a day when the president's power to regulate foreign commerce would serve, in Adams's words, as the machinery for doing away with navies, armies, and wars. The goal was idealistic, the means coercive. In place of military power, America would use trade power. So it continued for the next century and a half. The industrial tariffs of the Republicans, the reciprocal trade concepts of the progressive-era Democrats, the federal government's structuring of companies such as RCA after the First World War, all were intended to ensure that the U.S. business community did what Washington considered necessary for the nation's security. Perhaps the most dramatic example was the trading regime that the United States imposed on Europe and Japan after 1945. The goal, again, was utopian, an international economic system organized, in the words of a leading historian of the Marshall Plan, to make war materially impossible by making nations industrially interdependent. But the means were entirely realist. The U.S. government, along with its allies in Europe and Japan, determined which corporations did business where, how, and with whom. By doing so, it also kept real limits on how much the United States depended on any other nation. Throughout most of the post-war era, no one pretended that the international economy was anything other than a system of political power. The turning point came with the triumph of modern libertarianism, with its sophisticated Orwellian method of hiding corporate power behind the rhetoric of individual liberty. The key thinker, as with so many libertarian schemes, was Milton Friedman. In Free to Choose, his 1980 work, Friedman likened regulation of trade to masochism and sadism. He described the world economy not as a system deliberately constructed to promote stability and peace while distributing prosperity, but as a world market regulated by the infallible law of supply and demand. Even today, Friedman's writings give off a slight hippie vibe, with free trade sounding suspiciously like free love. Yet hidden behind the author's beatific smile was a specific and very pragmatic goal: to get Washington out of the business of governing international commerce so that the managers of private corporations could take over instead. Ronald Reagan is widely viewed as the chief votary of the libertarians, and in matters of domestic corporate policy, he certainly heeded Friedman's views. But when it came to trade, Reagan stuck to traditional Jeffersonian principles. The state must retain ultimate control. Dependence on foreign nations must be avoided. Never did Reagan prove this more robustly than when he used trade and monetary policy to quash Japanese efforts to dominate such industries as cars and semiconductors. It was not until 1993 that Friedman found a true acolyte in the White House, when Bill Clinton took office. He moved with remarkable swiftness to shore up the power of private corporations, especially when it came to trade. By 1994, he had negotiated and signed an agreement that shifted the regulation of America's commerce from the people's government in Washington, which may or may not have been doing a great job with it, to the corporate-dominated World Trade Organization. Yes, okay. By 2000, he had succeeded in winning permanent most favored nation trading status for China. In tandem, the two acts effectively gave few corporations free rein to manage our trade with the autocratic regime in China. No matter how Clinton and his advisors may have chosen to depict their actions, these were not naive men. The Clinton White House fully accepted that America would need to exert real and punishing power abroad. To that end, they upheld the military strategy concocted by Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Cheney in 1992, whose primary mandate was that no rival must ever again emerge to challenge American arms. Together, the decisions to surrender America's trade power while buttressing America's military power added up to a radical overthrow of this country's republican traditions. Worse, they left our nation unable to defend itself or its allies against the trade power of predatory foreign nations. This is a long way to go to get to one of the more important points of this. Hope we can actually make it there. It's hard to feel sorry for the executive of a multinational corporation. Sure, she must swap the amusements of Cincinnati and Dallas for the discomforts of Singapore and Geneva, but expat salaries, chauffeured cars, live-in maids, and private schools help ease the pain. And if she must sometimes jet from Shanghai to Berlin to Sao Paulo, she will at least find a gauntlet of obsequious servers proffering hot towels, cold drinks, and aromatic spa treatments to ease the way. Yet, sit down with Jeremy Waterman, who directs China policy at the United States Chamber of Commerce in Washington, and you may find yourself feeling a bit weepy about the travails of today's corporate leaders, at least those who work in China. When I first asked Waterman about Beijing's mistreatment, or I guess just says treatment, of American companies, he stares at me as if unsure how to respond. Then he shakes his head. When a U.S. corporation does business in China, he says, its executives are going up against the whole system, the courts, the companies, the regulators, the government. For a growing number of firms, even giants like Boeing, day-to-day business increasingly means striving to please the Chinese government and the Communist Party. How ironic is that? Waterman and I don't bother to discuss why executives at American corporations would so readily expose themselves to the power of the Chinese state. To anyone in the business community, the answers are self-evident. First is the fact that so many U.S. companies now depend on China for the products they sell. For Walmart, it's barbecue grills and shoes. For Apple, it's assembly work. For Pfizer, it's chemicals. And while foreign companies have talked a lot about reducing their reliance on China, they nevertheless kept upping the ante year after year. Just last April, General Motors announced plans to pour another $16 billion into China. In September, Dell pledged a whopping $125 billion over the next 5 years, with an ominous promise to closely integrate Dell China strategies with Chinese national policies. The second reason corporations are willing to accede to Chinese diktats is the allure of Chinese markets. For General Motors, China already accounts for roughly a third of the cars that it sells. For Qualcomm, China accounts for roughly half its business. For Rio Tinto, China accounts for considerably more than half of its output of iron ore. Chinese sales of Apple iPhones topped U.S. sales in 2015, and when global markets were tanking in late August, Tim Cook helped arrest a rout in the company's stock by publicly assuring investors that the Cupertino giant had continued to experience strong growth for our business in China throughout July and August. A handful of U.S. companies avoided exposing themselves to Chinese control, sometimes at great cost. In March of 2010, in response to growing censorship and a surprisingly sophisticated hack, Google redirected Chinese and English language searches from the mainland to servers in Hong Kong. Beijing responded by temporarily cutting off access to Google's search engine, and more recently to Gmail. The cost to Google? Access to the world's largest market of web users, 649 million strong and growing. We did finally make it to the point at which this issue is beginning to get developed. I think we'll continue to keep an eye on these things and maybe discuss it a little bit more. I know it's an awfully long article, but what an interesting thought that this is actually sort of describing the death of the idea that somehow open trade with China was going to change the Chinese system ultimately, that they would see what America and American capitalism have to offer and bend themselves and their practices to acceptance of American ways of doing things. And instead, it turns out that the influence has run in exactly the opposite direction. How interesting, given that we now find ourselves
from
at the
Daily
mercy
Co's Radio
of their espionage
on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, I know it made for an awkward transition from top headlines of the day to this rather deeper and rather older article about China, but I'm glad we have this opportunity and this platform to use for things like that. We'll probably discuss a little bit more, and you'll get caught up with what's been happening in the here and now next with Justice Putnam on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Stay tuned.